This is a video that I've had on my mind for quite some time. I wanted to just sit down and tell you all about my burnout journey. And I wasn't quite sure how to film this video and what to put into it, but I was like, you know what? I'll just tell the story as though you and I have met for a coffee and I'm telling you all about it. So let's get chatty. Let me tell you everything that happened when I burnt out and what has happened since then. So if you haven't already got yourself one, go and get your favourite drink. Let's have a little cuppa together and I'll tell you what happened when I burnt out. So if we haven't met before, I'm Dr. Sarah. I'm a medical doctor and now a burnout coach. And so I help people, especially healthcare professionals who are struggling with burnout, to get through it, to overcome burnout and to stay out of it. So here is what happened when I burnt out. It was 2017 and I had graduated as a doctor that year. I was so excited to become a doctor. It was all I'd ever wanted. I couldn't wait. I did medicine as a graduate, so I did a degree first. I had a couple of years out. So it was something that had been on my heart for a very long time. I couldn't wait. Through my medical school years, I worked a part-time job as a healthcare assistant. So I felt like I was really well prepared to become a doctor. It was all going to be fine for me, is what I was telling myself, and I just could not wait to get stuck in and actually start this career that I'd been dreaming of for years. So it all started off well, and the first few months I was working as a doctor, I remember thinking to myself, I've heard stories of people getting burnt out. I don't think I really knew what burnout was at that time, but I remember speaking to one of the girls who'd graduated the year before me, and I asked her if she had any advice about the first year as a doctor, and she just said, prepare yourself because you will go home crying a lot. And I was like, really? Like, why? And she was like, you'll understand once you're in it. And I thought naively, oh, that's not me. Like, I'm going to be fine because I felt like, well, I have all this experience in the NHS and I know what shifts are like. I know what it's like to be in a clinical environment. Anyway, fast forward to a few months in, and my first few months were fine. It was when I moved on to my second rotation is when things really got difficult for me. So just to give you a bit of context and to paint a bit of a picture, I was working in a hospital that was 90 minutes away from where I live. So long commute, and when I was working runs of shifts, I was staying in the hospital accommodation. It was very basic. I would even go so far as to say it was pretty dingy, really not very nice. Fluorescent lighting, really thin carpet on kind of hard concrete floor, very uncomfortable bed with springs sticking out. You can hear all your neighbours, the walls are paper thin. Not a nice environment to be coming home to after, 13-hour shifts. And so I felt a bit isolated, and the job that I was working, that second rotation, just felt toxic. The ward I was on, there was a real culture of people not getting along. I would even say there were undertones of bullying. There was a lot of egos, and it didn't feel like a safe environment to be a very, very junior doctor. It didn't feel like somewhere that I could ask questions openly because you would be accused of not being good enough and not being fit to do the job. It felt really uncomfortable as a new doctor to be there. And I remember one particular day I messed something up. I think I must have ordered the wrong scan, a genuine mistake. And I remember the consultant finding out about it and telling me off in the middle of ward round. So we're in a bay of patients, there's 6 patients in this room, there's all the nursing staff, there's all the doctors, there's all the other allied health professionals. We're doing this ward round, and he realised that I've ordered the wrong scan for this patient. The patient hadn't had the scan. He just realised my mistake, and he shouted at me in front of this whole room full of people, like properly shouted at me. And I remember just fighting back the tears and trying my best to carry on that ward round. I felt like I was going to explode. I was so mortified and humiliated, and I held it together and carried on through that day and went home and cried. But that was just an example of how toxic this workplace was. And at the time, I didn't really understand that that wasn't okay and that wasn't normal and that wasn't a healthy work environment. I just thought, well, he knows best and this is the way things are here. Now I know much better and I would feel more confident speaking up about that kind of thing and defending myself. But at the time, I just didn't have those skills, and I also didn't have the knowledge or the experience. So that was my work situation. Outside of work, I was desperately trying to cling on to my identity outside of being a doctor. I remember lots of people saying to me, once you become a doctor, that's your life, you know, it's a vocation, it's a calling, you have to go all in on it. And I remember thinking, well, that's not me. I'm somebody who's passionate. I'd been running a business outside of my medical studies, and so I wanted to carry that on. I have friends up and down the country, and I wanted to make sure that I kept those relationships alive and seeing them lots. I'm somebody who has a lot of interests and a lot of creative hobbies going on. So outside of work, I was busy. I was trying my best to do everything and to keep up the level of activity that I had going on before I started work as a doctor. Looking back, I can see that that was a huge contributor to my own burnout, because I was just too busy and I wasn't giving myself any downtime. I wasn't allowing myself to rest and relax. And what that meant was that I was running on very little sleep, pushing myself to my extremes, always trying to fill my calendar with as many things as possible to kind of prove to myself that I wasn't just a doctor, that I had other things going on outside of work. As a consequence of that, I burnt out. So what that looked like for me was I was always ill. Always ill. I felt run down and unwell all the time. I felt anxious most of the time. I would have frequent panic attacks. I felt a sense of dread every morning waking up going into work for months on end. And I couldn't enjoy my weekends because I was just so distracted, worrying about the week ahead, worrying about what I'd done the week before and whether it was good enough. I was tired all the time. I was stressed all the time, always worrying that I wasn't good enough, always feeling like an imposter, feeling like I wasn't as good as the rest of my cohort. I started to question whether medicine was the right job for me, whether being a doctor really was my calling. And I felt so upset about that because I was like, this is the thing that I've wanted for like a decade and that I've trained for so many years. You know, I've spent 7 years at university, 3 years doing my undergrad, 4 years doing my graduate entry medicine degree. Now I'm questioning whether this is the career for me. And I remember Googling what other careers can you do with a medical degree and what will happen if I drop out in my first year graduating as a doctor. And I was searching desperately on all these different Facebook forums about what to do, how I could get out of it, and what was going to happen to me if I ended up taking some extended time off. So that was my first year as a doctor. It was pretty hellish for me. And I remember getting to the end of that year and speaking to a few other people in my cohort, opening up to them about how I'd been feeling. I was so surprised because they all said they felt the same. It really shocked me because I felt like everyone else seemed to be coping. Everyone else seemed to be just gliding through the year, but the reality was that they weren't, and they were struggling as well, but we hadn't really spoken about it openly. I think part of that is because in medicine we're fed this idea that we can't open up when we're struggling because it could be a professionalism issue. I was already worried that people thought I wasn't good enough. Now, there wasn't really any evidence for that. You know, I was jumping through all the hoops, I was going to the courses, I was doing all the things I had to do, I was showing up to work every day, living up to the standards that were expected of me. But the reality of that versus how I felt inside were two very different stories. So that was my first year as a doctor, and at that point I really did think about quitting and finding a totally new career. Things started to change for me as I entered my second year as a doctor. At that point I changed hospitals, and that was just the natural progression of the first 2 years of my foundation training. This hospital that I moved to was a massive teaching hospital, and the whole atmosphere in that hospital was totally different. There was a culture of openness and speaking up and teaching and learning, and they appreciated that I was a second year qualified doctor, an F2, whereas in the first hospital I always got this sense that they expected too much of us as first year qualified doctors. And there was a lot of shame if you didn't know things or you had to ask for help with things. So my second year, I really threw myself into the experience. I got a lot from it. And I got to the end of that second year and I still felt, exhausted, but I wasn't having the same symptoms of anxiety or anything like that. But at that point, I realised I need a break. I need a break from my career and I need a break from being full-time as a doctor. I became a locum doctor at that point, which is where you're basically on a 0 hours contract. You pick up shifts as and when. And it was in that year that I really started to do some serious introspection and to start thinking about what my priorities are in life, what I want my life to look like and the future I wanted to build for myself. And in the years since then, I have gone on this huge deep dive into personal development, self-care, looking after myself really well, understanding who I am as a person, what my core values are, what my priorities are in life. I wish I could go back in time to past me, to that me that was really struggling in my first year, and to just be able to be like, it will get so much better. I would tell that past version of me that she should speak to people, tell people how you're feeling, open up about it. You don't have to get through this all on your own, and maybe seek some professional help. I didn't really know what burnout was. I think if I'd had more information and more education about that, I would have spoken to my GP, perhaps had some coaching, perhaps had some counselling, take some time off sick just to rest and relax and recuperate before going back into it in a more gentle way. So I hope this video has been helpful. I hope it's been interesting to hear a little bit about my burnout story. And if you're going through something similar at the moment, I just want to let you know that you are not alone, and hopefully the comments under this video will show you that you're not alone. And I've created a totally free masterclass for you called Switch Off, which is about how to stop overthinking about work when you're not at work. Go ahead and look at that. That's linked in the description box. And I have loads of other free resources and videos here on YouTube, so feel free to have a look around my channel and watch some more videos about burnout. I would love to hear from you in the comments below. Tell me what's going on with you, how you're doing, and let's get the conversation started. One of the things I love about YouTube is the community here, and hearing other people's stories is so powerful. So please share yours in the comments below and let's get the conversation started. If you haven't already, make sure you're subscribed to my channel, hit that notification bell, and I will see you in the next video. If you've enjoyed this video, you will like this video right here, where I share tips and ideas for how to be less stressed. I will see you in the next one. Bye.